Hey guys, enter the stars. And here we are. Janus and Jambres in front of the Pharaoh's court. Snakes eating snakes. What am I talking about? Well, this is an old biblical passage that many people know about two magicians that came before the Pharaoh's court to battle Moses and Aaron. And what ended up happening is they turned rods into snakes. And it's interesting because Trump talks about being the snake. But when we dig deeper and look at these two biblical figures, Janus and Jambres, immediately the Janus archetype jumps out at us, because we've been covering this for several months now, comparing Trump to Janus, the two-faced god. We found all kinds of clues linking Trump to Janus. We saw Paul Revere in the two-headed Janus coin. And Trump is a Gemini. And that rabbit hole goes very deep if you're unsure about the connection between Trump and Janus. But this other character is what interested me. Jambres. Now, according to She Knows, Jambres means poverty, bitter, a rebel. Now, what could that possibly mean? Well, when you really think about that, Joe Biden claims poverty, did he not? He always talked about being poor. Here are some of the news articles about Biden claiming poverty. Now, I don't believe for a second that he's really poor, but it's the role he is playing. Republicans versus Democrats, rich versus poor. This is what they've always claimed about each other, is it not? So this brings us to Janus and Jambres, both snakes. In the end, the person who won this battle was God, the Most High. And the fake God, the fake Pharaoh, lost the battle. Now look at some of these depictions of Janus and Jambres. Interesting they put this arch back here. We've been talking all about the arch. I began to wonder, what is this all about? Well, this is the portal. They actually show an arc of triumph back here in the background. And that is just very bizarre. Now, of course, this is just one depiction of Janus and Jambres, but I thought that this was interesting nonetheless. Let's read about these two biblical figures before we move on to the snake bite and where we're all headed. You see, Janus created the venom, and Jambres, which is bitten, will deliver the venom. The two sides work together. And this is why I believe these two biblical characters were explained to us, because God wanted us to see the right-left paradigm. The rich magician and the poor magician. Basically two sides to the same coin. They're both magicians. They're both sent to deceive you. They're both snakes. So, it says here in Jewish and Christian traditions, Janus and Jambres are the names given to magicians mentioned in the book of Exodus. This naming tradition is well attested in ancient and medieval literature, in Latin manuscripts of the New Testament, and in Latin writing traditions. Their names are known as Janus and Jambres. They're not specifically mentioned in the Tanakh and the Hebrew Bible, but the Egyptian wise men and sorcerers are mentioned in Exodus. So here's the passage. Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh called his wise men and sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantment. They cast down every man his rod, and they became as serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. Now, why would their rods become serpents? Why would Moses and Aaron's rod become a serpent, or Aaron's rod in this case? Because God was mocking Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh is the serpent. He's the one with the serpent on the pineal gland coming out of the forehead. Or the serpent coming out of the chest the spear coming out of the chest, like we talked about in the Donnie Darko, as well as Stargate SG-1. They had a whole storyline of this serpent in the chest. Do you see how all this fits together with everything we've been talking about now? These portals. This is how the ancient Egyptians trumped time, through arcs of triumph, by reanimating old DNA, repossessing those bodies throughout time. So why would God have his holy servants turn it into a snake, the rod into a snake? It's because he was mocking the Pharaoh. Pharaoh came back with his magic, but of course it did not work, because in the end, God created everything. He has power over all matter. So this is the story between these two battles. Now, of course, the true paradigm is good versus evil, and that would be God's holy servants versus the knockoff counterfeit servants of the Egyptian Pharaoh. Do you see how the fake paradigm is exposed and the true paradigm is revealed in this story? Now, I'm not going to belabor you all of the details of this. You can read up on that for yourself. But where is all this leading? Well, the State Bar of New York is now entertaining the thought of making VCs mandatory. This is from law.com. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Now, as I'm presenting this show, this is not a live show. I pre-recorded this yesterday for you guys so that I could be in the chat with you. So if you have questions, I'm in the chat right now, and you can just drop those questions in there. We can have discussions about this. But it says here, this is a resolution. It does contain conditions limiting its scope. Those include that the state gov should only consider making VCs mandatory if voluntary CVVCs fall short of producing needed levels of population immunity. Do you see how they control the narrative? How do they know what the necessary levels are for population immunity? And even if they did, and even if all of this was real, do you really have the right to poke someone in the arm with something that they don't want, or have a question about, or just simply don't want it? This is the question. And this is why we were so hard on Trump, because he created this. And now it doesn't matter if he leaves office or not. Somebody's going to make this happen, because there's a lot of money on the table, somewhere in the order of $1 trillion. That came out of all of our pockets, regardless of whether or not you want to take the VC. You already paid for it. How do you like that? Not a very wise use of tax dollars, isn't it? If they could build the wall without our tax dollars, why are they using our tax dollars for a VC? And this is where you begin to see the snake coming out of its skin. Because, make no mistake, if Bitten gets the office, he will impose this on some level, or he'll allow the governors to impose it. It says here that an assessment of the health threat to various communities be made so that perhaps the mandate can be targeted, and that a mandate only be considered after there is expert consensus. See, expert consensus. Who are the experts? I don't trust experts. And the VC's safety and efficacy. I don't trust their assessment of safety and efficacy. So there it is, mRNA. Now, YouTube is going around being very aggressive about pulling down videos that make any claims about the technology behind this and how it might affect you on the molecular level. And of course they're going to do that because there's been no studies. Now we actually covered on a video probably about 3 months ago, talking about this technology and the concerns that they had in the animal realm and the veterinary realm, because this is where they first used this. Well, there's at least 2 videos up on this channel. You might behoove you to take a look at that and make sure that you understand the concerns that they had early on before all this happened. We're talking 10 years ago. We were looking at these studies and they were talking about D to the N to the A and R to the N to the A. Okay? So this isn't all in people's heads. And there are some very legitimate people coming forward with concerns that have credentials, and they're being censored on Facebook, on YouTube. So anytime they start to do something like that, it's because there's an agenda. So those of you that come to this channel know what's up, but many people don't. And this is why we have to expose it, because many people will stand in line and take this, not knowing all the information they need to know about it, and maybe even giving into the idea of making this mandatory for you and I. This is why we have to keep talking about it. This is why I was so hard on Trump, because he made this with our tax dollars. So that's about all I have for you today. There'll be video live shows up, or at least premieres. I do plan on uploading one over the weekend. I will be with you guys on that one. Same exact time, every single day. 8:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Even if you don't get a notification, just go on to YouTube and you will see us live. And I appreciate everybody that does show up to these shows. And again, if you have other questions in the chat, just drop them in as this show comes to a close, and I can answer those questions and hang out with you guys as the chat closes. Now, some of you have noticed, if you make the tail end of some of these shows, you'll notice that you can't get into the chat. That's nothing I'm doing. That's YouTube. So as soon as the show's over, the chat closes. So I just want you to understand that, so that you don't get frustrated. It's not that you've been blocked. It's just that's the way YouTube works. So about 5 minutes after the show ends, the chat closes, and sometimes you're blocked from leaving comments and things like that. But anyway, I love each and every one of you. Take care and be safe, you guys.